So the Texans had pretty big news today. Earlier on today, you can see there at 10 a.m. It's currently 6 p.m. Trent Brown and the Houston Texans reached an agreement on a one-year extension worth up to $7 million per his agent Drew Rosenhaus. This is a big deal for us. We didn't have many offensive linemen headed into free agency. We just had Ariante Ursary and Jake Andrews as returning starters from last year on this offensive line after trading Titus Howard, and then obviously Ed Ingram and Trent Brown were both due to be free agents, but now it's just Ed Ingram as Trent Brown has now signed a one-year extension. I think this is a good deal. Trent Brown was on a one-year, $3 million deal last year with about 2.345 million in base salary, and then the rest in bonus incentives. This one, I don't know what the base salary is going to be. I don't know what the incentives are going to be. We just know that in total it's going to be 7 million. So if you want to go see how our cap space looks right now, you can go to HoustonStressins.com on the cap calculator. You'll be able to see how much cap space the Texans do have. We did restructure Derrick Stingley today, which is another thing I am about to show you. As it was Aaron Wilson who reported it. He said that the Texans converted 20.38 million of Derek Stingley's 21.59 million salary into a signing bonus with a standard restructure, not a max restructure, which means there's two extra void years on the restructure. It's just a standard restructure, which gets spaced out across 3 years. So basically, taking out the remainder of Derek Stingley's contract, there's going to be some added cap space there, but savings of nearly $16 million from 27.095 million original cap figure per league source. So Derek Stingley is due about 11 million in um, cap salary headed into next season. The rest is signing bonus, which he just gets paid right away. This is engraved into players' contracts, as Aaron Wilson has, repeatedly stated. So, it takes 5 minutes to do. Casario just calls Stingley, says, "Hey, we're going to give you the money right now on a signing bonus, and we're going to restructure you because we need the money headed into free agency." So, what this did was it put us cap compliant. We're now at 7.8 million in the positive sign, not in the red. We're in the green. Um, so that's always a positive. Enough money to go after a Wyatt Teller, you'd presume, or halfway there to a Cade Mays or a Braden Smith, if that's something you want to look at. But yeah, two fairly big moves. I really like the idea of a Trent Brown coming back, even if he's not your starting right tackle. I think that's something that is going to be in contention. He's going to be competing for his right tackle spot. I think that Blake Fisher could potentially compete there. He looked good at the end of the year playing in that six offensive lineman role. I think Trent Brown could be our sixth offensive lineman heading next year because I don't think this rules out the potential of a Braden Smith coming in. Uh, Aaron Wilson said the number for Braden Smith would be about 13 million a year. So if we give him a 2 for 26 and then you pay Trent Brown $7 million, then if Braden Smith misses a game, then Trent Brown's able to come step up and do that role. If you want to run with six offensive linemen next year, you can, move Trent Brown into that sixth offensive lineman role, and I think he'd be perfect there. So I think it's great value on the deal for Trent Brown, and I think it allows you to be flexible headed into free agency. I think the continuity on the offensive line is something that's very important, and I think continuity with your tackles is more important than the interior of your offensive line. We didn't really have a communicator last year. I think Cade Mays would definitely come in and be a communicator for us if he was someone that does come in. Um, you could go get Pregnon, you could go get Basantis, you could go get Keelan Rutledge, but you could also get Wyatt Teller in the draft to be a mentor and a coach to those guys as well. And I think that's what Trent Brown might do. I think that might signify that we're looking to the tackles in the draft because obviously Ehanichor, Miller are guys that are going to be in our range. Potentially Proctor, you don't know how far he's going to fall. I think a team's going to bank on his athleticism, but um, yeah, the signing of Trent Brown does free up a lot for this Texans team. And if you are going to go with a big tackle, Exhibit A, Caden Proctor, then Trent Brown's going to be the perfect coach for him to tell him, how to play the game. He's going to be a perfect coach for them. And then I'd really like to get a Wyatt Teller, even if he's, just a 1 year rental, just to coach those guys that are potential rookies. Again, like the guys I noted, in a Pregnon, a Basantis, a Rutledge, a Shrouth, any of those guys. I think, having a Wyatt Teller there with experience would really coach them up. And I think having a communicator on the inside, like a Cade Mays, would be uber important to their development as well, because the more communication, the more you understand what the defense is trying to do, the more you can combat that with your hands, with your athleticism, whatever that guard, really specializes in. But yeah, this restructure here opens up cap space for us. And then the signing of Trent Brown, um, really gives us a flexible stance headed into free agency, where I'm going to talk about some free agents in this video that I would like us to sign. We'll start off here with the first person I talked about in today's video, and that was Mr. Braden Smith of the Indianapolis Colts. 29 years old, so he has about three years left, I think, of pretty good production in the NFL. Um, offensive line can go pretty late, especially at the tackle position, because you're relying on athleticism a little bit, but you're not pulling like a guard is, or even potentially a center. You're pretty much just making sure you're kick stepping out. And being agile while using your hands and still having power behind them. But you can see the pass blocking grade is significantly better than the run blocking grade. Um, but years prior, if you go to 2024, you can see that the run block grade is a lot better than the pass block grade. Little inconsistent this year, but I think he's a really, really good player, and I think that inconsistency is going to give him a cut price deal. And again, Aaron Wilson said it would be around the $13 million range to get a Braden Smith. So I think two for 26, two for 28, even two for 30. I'd take Braden Smith in a heartbeat because that's your starting right tackle for the next couple of years, right there. And I think that's someone the Texans should really be interested in. Um, Aaron Wilson did say that they were interested in a Braden Smith, a Cade Mays, a Wyatt Teller, which are all three players we're going to talk about in this video. Um, but if you want to go to Braden Smith, you can see he played 666 offensive snaps and only allowed one sack. And he played all of these at right tackle. So he's just going to be a plug and play guy right away. As soon as you bring him in, he's going to slot in at that right tackle position. Only allowed 6 quarterback hits. 26 total pressures allowed at right tackle is very, very solid. Sometimes, he was lining up against the team's best rushers. Um, and you have to hold up a while in that Colts offense. That's another thing. You know how reliant they were on play action, allowing Daniel Jones to drop back into play action, throw it over the middle to the likes of Alex Pierce, Michael Pittman Jr., or even at times Tyler Warren on those screens and stuff like that. You're going to have to hold up if you're a player. And Braden Smith certainly did that for them. This year, been a mainstay tackle for them. He signed a 4-year, $70 million extension 4 years ago, I believe, for the Colts, and he's been one of the better tackles in the league ever since. Really valuable across the league, the tackle positions, and I think the Texans had a home run pick last year in Arion Ursary. Did just bring back Trent Brown, as I talked about earlier on today, which is another big one. But I think Braden Smith would be someone that comes in and is a really, really solid piece to add to this offense because that, again, allows Trent Brown to, uh, stay healthy and be that sixth offensive lineman. So even if Braden Smith does go down with injury, we do have a very, very solid backup in Trent Brown to come in. And it's very incentive based. I would assume the Trent Brown contract up to $7 million usually signifies that a significant portion of it is incentive driven because we know he does have an injury history. So you're not going to pay someone who's old with an injury history at 32 years old a really high base salary. You're going to give him incentives so he toughens up, plays through it. And performs to the best of his ability at that age. So I think Braden Smith could take some pressure off of Trent Brown, and I think that would be a really, really good signing. And I think he could slot perfectly to start at right tackle because he's a really good pass protector, but he's also very solid in the run block game too. Even if the grade from this year doesn't show it, the grade from last year certainly does, and I'm sure the grade from 2023 will show something similar as well. Yeah, 90.1. That's all you need to see. Uh, really, really good run blocker there in Braden Smith, who's also very good in the pass block game. But the Colts love to run downhill, and I think Braden Smith really enhances that ability because you know how much Jonathan Taylor loves to jump cut in between tackles. Um, so I think he'd be perfect, especially for a David Montgomery led backfield. Woody Mark's going to be a really, really good complementary back. I have no doubts in that. I think he's better as a change of pace guy that's going to come out the backfield, catch some passes for you, and block at a high rate. David Montgomery, another very good blocker there too. So yeah, I think Braden Smith could come in and be a very, very good guy for you at that right tackle position. Even if you just re-sign Trent Brown, I don't think it stops you from going out and getting a Braden Smith. Moving on to another one, though, we got Wyatt Teller, the guard from the Cleveland Browns. You can see the grades aren't that great this season. He had a pretty not to his standard season. I think he was thinking he was going to get traded, or maybe age is catching up to him. You never know, but you can see that the run block grade was a lot higher than the pass block grade, and I'm not going to blame him for that pass block grade. He's dealing with a pretty incompetent offensive line over there in Cleveland, especially from his outside at that right tackle position. He's going to be able to play right guard. That's what he played last year. You see 2024, I bet the grade's a lot better. You see 2023, he was one of the better guards in the league. Same in 2022. Just been a very consistent guard, one of the better guards in the league for a while. Really, really good run blocker. You can see the grades always in the 70s or 60s, which is something that you're aiming for an offensive lineman. If it's a 60, it's very solid, and then if it's the 70s, then it's very above average. Um, but yeah, the play started to dip for Wyatt Teller. I'm not gonna, shy away from that. It did dip a little bit. He did allow 3 sacks, but he's still a really really solid player. And again, I think the big thing is he's going to be a mentor for these people on the offensive line. If you're bringing in some rookies, again, like a Basantis, a Pregnon, a Rutledge, a Strouth, a who else is on the interior? You can move a Blake Miller to the interior if you want. You can move a Caden Proctor to the interior if you want. You can bring in Jennings Dunker, move him to the interior if you want. So, bring in Wyatt Teller, keeping Trent Brown is saying, hey, we can bring some veterans in this room that can coach up our guys to be, better players overall because they're experiencing what players are going to experience in their careers. You still have Cole Popovich there, who's an incredible coach. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes one voice and isn't enough. So if you're able to get a mentor as a guard, a mentor as a tackle, and then a mentor as a center, then that's always something that's going to carry down. You know, as Nick Casario and D'Amico Ryans have started to call the Texans a program, if you get these mentors like a Teller, a Brown, even Braden Smith, they're going to be able to mentor these guys to help the program keep churning out solid offensive linemen. So I think Teller, Aaron Wilson said he has interest in coming in here, or he has interest coming here. The Texans have interest bringing him in. I'd be open arms to bring him in. To be honest, I think he's a really solid player. I think some of his play diminished just because he didn't want to be a Cleveland Brown. He probably thought he was going to get traded at last deadline. Didn't come to fruition, but I think he's certainly going to be looking for a new opportunity on the open market to show how good of an offensive lineman he is. I think that could happen in Houston, and I don't think it'll be too expensive. So I think this is an opportunity. I'm a Chelsea fan, so you hear the word opportunity thrown a lot out there. If the price is right, it's an opportunity for a player, and I think Wyatt Teller is certainly an opportunity on the open market for the Texans to go attack, because again, his play did diminish a little bit last season. So some teams may say, hey, he might be regressing a little bit. I don't know if it was regression from Wyatt Teller or just general uninterest in playing for the Cleveland Browns because of how dysfunctional that organization really is. But again, a really, really good offensive lineman, and I'd be ecstatic if the Texans were able to bring him in. You see the overall grade here at a 62.2 pass block grade, little down there at 53.1 pass block grade at 65.7, which isn't bad. And you can see he only allowed one quarterback hit allowed and only 24 total pressures allowed. So nothing too big. Been with the Browns for a while and been a very solid player. Even if you go back to 2019, you can see he was a very solid guard to uh, start out his career with the pass blocking and then developed as a run blocker. You can see 2020 was his best year. Uh, I believe this was the year that they made the playoffs with Baker Mayfield. Best guard in the league, they say. But yeah, always been a really good run blocker, and I think would definitely help David Montgomery. This is going to be another Ed Ingram type of guy that is a lot better of a run blocker than pass blocker, but I think Wyatt Teller is a better pass blocker than Ed Ingram, and I think it's a little unfair that grade at 53.1. Again, wasn't perfect by any means. I'm not saying it was, but I think it was certainly better than a 51.3. I just think, the talent around him put him in some unfortunate positions, and I still think he has a lot left in the tank at that guard position. If you bring him on a 1 year deal worth $5 million, if you bring him on a 2 year deal worth $10 million, I wouldn't be mad. I don't think the market's going to be very, very high for Wyatt Teller. I know Spottrack says he's going to get $10 million on average a year. I don't think that's the truth. I think he's going to get a Trent Brown deal. I think would be very, very smart for Wyatt Teller. I think 5 in base salary, 2 in incentives, or 4.5 in base salary, 2.5 in incentives could be something that you look at for a Wyatt Teller. And I think that's something he'd want to do because he wants to come to a contender. And I think if you rebuild this offensive line here in Houston and make it a solid unit headed into next year, then you have a contender here in Houston. So I think Wyatt Teller would definitely play a big piece in that because players play to their ceiling when they're playing for a contender, and they're getting into the latter stages of their career because they do want to go win a ring. So um, if you're bringing in Wyatt Teller, someone with that mentality of, hey, I don't have that many years left in the league, I want to go win a ring, so I'm going to play my best to go win a ring, then you're getting a great offensive lineman there. So I think Nick Casario should definitely explore that opportunity in free agency. The third player I'm talking about, though, is Mr. Cade Mays of the Carolina Panthers. Y'all know this was going to come. We've been linked to Cade Mays since I don't I don't know when I posted that video, maybe a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, where I analyzed Cade Mays' game. Texans were linked to him all the way back then. Texans have been linked to him ever since, and it hasn't really stopped. Cade Mays was thrown around at the combine toward the Texans too. Kenneth Walker was as well, but we got David Montgomery. We're not going to go after Kenneth Walker, and I think going after David Montgomery was a sign that we're going to be aggressive on the offensive line in free agency because David Montgomery is a $6 million player heading into next year. I think that's going to increase by 1 to 2 million. We're going to reconstruct his deal, not restructure his deal. We're going to give him an extension, um, but it's going to be probably $8 million uh, in total, 6 million base salary, 2 million in incentives, and probably half guaranteed. He has no guaranteed money right now, which is what I think Casero is going to try to help him out with, just to give him some assurances that the Texans do really value him. It's the courteous thing to do when you bring a player in and they want a new deal. And I don't think Casero is really going to shy away from that. I think they're going to give Dave Montgomery what he wants, and I think Dave Montgomery definitely deserves that with this play over there in Detroit. I know we haven't seen it as a Texan yet, but certainly deserves it, especially with the value we gave up for him. But saving that money at the running back position makes me think that we are going to spend it on the offensive line. And you can see Cade Mays here, who has a 62.4 overall grade, a 58.4 run block grade, a 70 pass block grade. No sacks allowed, which tied first for all centers. Only 2 penalties, which was fourth. Only 3 quarterback hits allowed. Only 11 total pressures allowed. Really good player for the Panthers last year, has been for quite some time. You can see the grades there in 2024 were even better than 2025. In 2023, I believe this is when he was playing guard. 2023 and 2022, I believe he was playing guard. Moved him over to center in 2024, showed a really big increase. But yeah, these seasons he was, I believe, playing guard. Um, yeah, played at left guard in 2023, and in 2022 played a little bit at right guard. 2024 is when he made that switch over to center, and that's when he's been at his best. So, yeah, really good piece on the offensive line. Cade Mays will be. I think he's going to get around 13 to 14 million dollars a year. I think he's going to be very similar to the Braden Smith contract, but I think Cade Mays would be someone to give a 3 year, 4 year deal to. To be honest, he's young enough at 26 years old. I think if you give him a 3 year deal worth $39 million, worth $40 million, it's something he's not going to pass up on. Um, that's life changing money for a guy like Cade Mays. Came from Tennessee. I don't know if he was undrafted or just drafted late, but a really good communicator on the offensive line, which the Texans certainly need. And in my opinion, a big upgrade on Jake Andrews, who was playing injured last year. Don't get me wrong, and he wasn't awful, but I think you can certainly upgrade at that center position and get some more size in there, which Cade Mays at 6'6" is certainly that. But I think his communication is a skill that we need most on the offensive line. His ability to diagnose who's the mic, who's coming, who's not coming, point it out to the offensive lineman pre-snap to allow them to, understand what they need to do. Is going to be really valuable because I think we lack communication as an offensive line unit last season and especially the year before. But I think Popovich, excuse me, got those boys playing a little bit better this past season, and I think Cade Mays would get them closer to their ceiling and certainly raise that floor due to the communication factor. So, um, yeah, if we're able to get Cade Mays on the open market, this is definitely something I would want to bring in him or the player that I'm talking about next, which I will show y'all right now. That player would be Mr. Conor McGovern, excuse me, of the Buffalo Bills. You can see the grades there below at 69.1 overall, 73.4 pass block, 65.2 run block grade. Only 28 years old, so it's not like he's young, but it's not like he's old. But a really good player. Again, no sacks allowed at the center position. A lot of centers don't really have any sacks allowed because it's really hard to, give up a sack unless you're the one that got bulldozed over and, the team's running 3-4 and they have two outside linebackers in 9 techs outside the tackles. They have a D lineman on top of you. Not many teams do that in the league, so it's really difficult for a center to give up some sacks. I know Jake Andrews had a couple in there, I believe, but Conor McGovern's expected to have a pretty big market and a pretty pricey market, so I don't think the Texans will necessarily go after him, but I think he's a really good fit in Houston. So I don't know if Nick Casario will value that, but I think he's going to be around 16 to 17 million. Conor McGovern will be, so I don't know if the Texans will pay all that when he can get Cade Mays for 13 to $15 million range. Again, if Mays is 15, McGovern's 16. I don't know who I'd go after. I think I'd side with Mays slightly, but I like the idea of Conor McGovern in Houston. Don't get me wrong, but again, the market's pricey, so I don't know if the Houston Texans will really go for him. But I just wanted to make a note for him of a potential target in free agency, just because of how much I like the player, and I think he'd be a good fit wherever he goes because he's a good communicator on the offensive line. And the Buffalo Bills have had some decent offensive line play for some time now with him, David Edwards, Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, and then whoever they have at right guard. Always been a serviceable player. So, yeah, just wanted to note Conor McGovern, and we'll move on to his teammate, actually, and we'll talk about David Edwards next. Here we are with David Edwards, 28-year-old from the Bills as well. You can see the overall grade there at 71.4, pass block grade at 73, run block grade at 69. The left guard for the Bills, if you want to look here, you can see all 1,035 snaps were played at left guard this season. 3 sacks allowed, which is a decent amount for a left guard. You'd like it to be at 2 or 1, but again, 3 sacks not going to kill someone. Only 3 penalties over the course of the season. Only 1 quarterback hit allowed and 27 total pressures allowed. So Bills, a lot of times when they passed were in, passing downs. They didn't really have to pass, and they didn't have to with how good James Cook was this year. And David Edwards was certainly a big reason as to why. Um, I don't know how expensive his market's going to be. Um, I think it'll probably be around the tier below an Ed Ingram, maybe at that 13 to 15 million, similar to the Cade Mays market. Because I haven't really heard his name thrown around too much. David Edwards, I think Conor McGovern's kind of stealing that spotlight from him from the Buffalo Bills, because a lot of teams are center needy. Obviously, Tyler Biotish got cut from the Commanders, and then was it Drew Dahlman that ended up retiring, or not from the from the Commanders? Tyler Biotish got cut, and then um, Drew Dahlman got cut from the Bears, I believe. So, or not cut, retired from the Bears. Wishing him well. He retired at 27 years old. Just to, I don't know if it was mental health or to be with family, but I wish him well in his retirement. Really good player while he was in the league. But sometimes you have to prioritize those things. So I don't blame him for doing that. David Edwards, though, I think if he's around the 13 to $15 million range, then maybe you side away from it. I think he's a really good player, and I think if you bring him on a 2 year deal, then he can definitely impact your interior offensive line. But then again, if you have that opportunity of a Wyatt Teller for 6 million, 5 million, 7 million, I don't know what the market will be for a Wyatt Teller. You go after that all day of the week because you're getting a player that's very solid for half the price of a David Edwards, and I think he could be more impactful for you long term with the rookies that you'll bring in on the interior offensive line. So if it comes down to a Wyatt Teller or David Edwards, and Wyatt Teller's half the price, then I'm going Wyatt Teller all day of the week. But David Edwards definitely a solid player, and if there's a pretty heavy bid war for a Wyatt Teller, then I'd like the Texans to pivot and go after David Edwards, who might be off the market before a Wyatt Teller, but someone I'd like the Texans to consider. And we'll move on to the last player of this, which is Mr. Isaac Seumalo from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Really good grades last year. I think probably one of the better years of his career. Been solid for some time now, but I think last year was really a standout year for him. Maybe 2023 edges it slightly, or 2022. No, 2021 was definitely his best year. But 2025 was great too. Don't get me wrong. Really, really good in the pass block game. Really solid in the run block game as well. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, only allowed 3 sacks. They're similar to David Edwards. You want that to be a 2 or a 1, but again, 3 sacks is not the end all be all. Um, and only 1 quarterback hit, only 15 total pressures allowed. Uh, and really efficient in the run block grade. This is similar to a Wyatt Teller. This is going to be another mentor on your offensive line. This time, this is from your left guard, not your right guard. But if you bring in a Pregnon, a Basantis, a Rutledge, a Stroud, they're all going to be able to play right guard in the NFL. It's not like they're only tied down to a left guard, and Stroud and Rutledge are tied down to a right guard position now. They're able to get play either guard position if they really want to. And I think Isaac Seumalo is definitely a good mentor as well. I'd prefer Wyatt Teller as a mentor, but I'd prefer Isaac Seumalo as a player, if that makes sense. I think the market for Seumalo is going to be a little bit more pricey than a Wyatt Teller. I think this is going to be $11 million, $12 million a year player on a 1 year or 2 year deal, because he's already 32 years old, but his play hasn't really dropped off yet. So, you could get 1 to 2 more years of really, really good production from Isaac Seumalo. So I think if the Texans want to explore someone that can be a mentor, then Seumalo could definitely be a guy if Teller's off the market. But I think again it's going to cost $5 to $6 maybe $1 million more than Wyatt Teller maybe, or for you don't really know what the markets are for these players until they hit the open market, unless something's been reported. But Isaac Seumalo, I expect him to have a pretty decent market there with how good he was in Pittsburgh last year, and I would expect the Pittsburgh Steelers to look at potentially re-signing him, because I thought he was really, really good for them. But then again, you don't know who their quarterback is, so you don't know if he's going to be a schematic fit with who that quarterback is, or if Mike McCarthy wants to bring him back or not. New head coach there. So I think there's going to be a lot of turmoil, turnover, and change in Pittsburgh. So, Seumalo may be a part of the crossfire there. It's going to hit the open market, though, and that's certain. after, tags deadlines already passed. So we'll see what the Steelers decide to do with him. I'm intrigued. I think everyone is intrigued, but I think he'd be a really, really good fit over here in Houston, to slot in and play right away at that left guard position, and of course be a mentor to the young guys that we are anticipating drafting. Um, but yeah, that does wrap everything up. To sum it up, we talked about the re-signing of Trent Brown, which provides that flexibility on the offensive line, which are all the targets I talked about today. I talked about the restructure of Stingley, which made us cap compliant. Talked about Braden Smith, Wyatt Teller, um, Cade Mays, Conor McGovern, David Edwards, Isaac Seumalo. And if I missed a name in there, I apologize, but I believe that was everyone. I think I only talked about 6 guys today. So there's that. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like and subscribe, and comment down below what you think about each of these free agents, or if there's another free agent I didn't talk about here that you do want the Houston Texans to sign. Let me know down in the comment section below. All the support really does mean a lot. We're trying to hit 500 subs, and then obviously on the road to 600, 700, 800, 900, and then eventually 1,000. 1,000 is my goal by the end of the year. I don't know how feasible that is, but we're gonna try. We're gonna upload videos as consistently as possible to try to get there. And I would really appreciate it if you do share this content with other people, to really help grow my channel, because it's all I want to do. I want to talk about the Texans. I'm a huge Texans fan. Been a season ticket holder since I was born. So, I love all things Texans. I'm always going to be a Texans fan. So, I appreciate y'all for supporting me, and, you know, being Texans fans yourselves. I hope you enjoy watching my content as well. So, yeah, that is all. Thank y'all so much for watching. And as always, it's Texans Takeover, and I'm out. Peace.